No, I take a little breath. Good evening. Welcome to Daring Debates Sri Lanka Chapter Finals. I'm Kamal Lianage, Director Academics of Regal Campus, and on behalf of Regal Campus, Daring Debates, Difficult Dialogues, and Global Sustainability Film Awards for the finals of Daring Debates Sri Lanka. We are proud to be the Sri Lankan partner of Daring Debates, and thank you, Daring Debates International and Difficult Dialogues, for giving us this great opportunity. I believe daring debate is a big opportunity for youth to speak out their own future. Everyone talks about the need for allowing youth to take part in policy discussions, but actually opens up very limited chances to listen to the youth and understand how they see their own future. So I believe daring debates is one such amazing opportunity for the youth. And having now daring debates going global, we also have that opportunity, and Difficult Dialogues, together with Global Sustainability Film Awards, has shown us the way for last 6 years, and hope it would be continuing to inspire our world and the youth. So meanwhile, we have a special person to talk to you. Shall we listen to Ms. Surina Narula, founder and the director and the brain of Difficult Dialogues, for a minute?
Thank you for that introduction. It gives me great pleasure to be part of a Sri Lankan venture, even though it is being organized virtually. I would like to thank Regal Campus for partnering with us. And thank you to Mudita for taking out time to moderate these debates. And of course, a huge thanks to the jury members. I would like to thank Dilrukshi, who has been really very helpful for many years. Every time I've gone to Sri Lanka, she was there. And I have been able to phone her anytime, and she's always come back with good suggestions. And I also would like to thank Professor Maitri Vikramasinghe, Chair and Senior Professor of English at University of Kelaniya. She's always helped us also. And the first time we came was with the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature. And of course, she hosted us and she really took care of everything we needed. I've always had a great welcome in Sri Lanka. So I look forward to these debates. And the reason we organize daring debates as part of difficult dialogues is to bring the youth voice to the international level. Young people have to decide what the future looks like. After all, they are going to inherit it. And this is our endeavor to bring youth voices to the front. I want to thank all the debaters for participating in this. The very fact that they have ventured to come out and speak publicly makes them winners.
Yes. Yes. As Regal Campus, we are there to join hands with you in future as well. The Regal Campus, is fairly new in the higher education sector. And yes, COVID has brought us a little silent over from March, but we have a group of experienced and enthusiastic team to go forward. This daring debates also gave us a boost to stand strong in this challenging situation and also to work with a set of inspired youth. So it's an integral part of our future journey as we are more into innovation and better use of modern technology, such as digital transformation, AI and robotics, design technology, etc. Today, as I have mentioned earlier, it's an exciting day. We had some doubts over getting through this with the sudden change of the situation of the country. But even during the early stages of the second wave, universities have sent us their nominations, and we got a very good, courageous debating teams. And we had our preliminary round last week, and now we have 8 good competitors ready to go and fight, fight by the voice. So we need to thank all the universities, VCs and deans and other staff who sent us nominations, and the contestants competing today. Also, we have a very experienced panel of judges, key figures of their own domains, those who have been contributing to the environmental conservation and sustainability in the country while working with the global scenarios as well. And so it's my duty to introduce our panel of judges. We have uh, Professor Devaka Veerakon. Thank you, sir, coming here. He's a senior professor in zoology and environmental sciences of the University of Colombo. He's renowned as an academic and research professional in the zoology and environmental science domain for over 3 decades, with special emphasis to long-term conservation of Asian elephants. Professor Veerakon's research focuses on the conservation of threatened species. Professor Veerakon was well recognized for his research contributions, including the Presidential Awards for Research. He has served in many expert panels and committees of universities, research institutes, global conservation organizations, and government agencies. Uh, Professor Veerakon long serves in the Department of Zoology and Environmental Science of the University of Colombo and has been guided many Sri Lankan youth environmentalists and academics. He currently represents the Board of Management of National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka as well. So thank you, Professor Devaka Veerakon, joining us today. And we have Mr. Hemanta Vitanage, Executive Director of Center for Environmental Justice. And he's an environmental activist by heart, I should say, who has immensely contributed in environmental conservation efforts of the country. He is appreciated most for his tireless, detailed legal battles against many human-triggered environmental damages and hazards of the country. Hemanta is a firm believer of community-driven engagements of sustainable conservation. In addition to leading local initiatives, Hemanta has contributed to many Asia-Pacific and global conservative initiatives. Hemant is the founder and executive director of Center for Environmental Justice, and he has his degree from University of California, and he's currently the international convener of the NGO Forum of ADB, and from 2016 he was the vice chair of the Friends of Earth International, the largest grassroots network of environmental organization in the. And also we have Miss Anjali Watson, and she is a passionate ecologist, predominantly working on the ecology and conservation of the Sri Lankan leopard, a threatened endemic subspecies, yes, you know. She brings a novel perspective to the research and conservation of this isolated apex carnivore by championing it as an umbrella species for landscape level conservation in Sri Lanka. Anjali voices the need to promote human wildlife coexistence in Sri Lanka and challenges the need to challenges the continuity to be high biodiversity nation. Anjali is a founding member and trustee of the Wilderness and Wildlife Conservation Trust in Sri Lanka. She is having a MSc from ecology from University of Edinburgh and bachelor's from McMaster University. She has over 20 years of research experience across continents and species, giving her international experience and exposure, which contributes to greatly towards the depth of wilderness and wildlife conservation trust in overall work. So thank you, Anjali, joining us. And we have Dilrukshi Handunnetti, senior editor, senior journalist for over decades, and she is the current executive director of Center for Investigative Reporting. And She's a multiple award-winning investigative journalist and a lawyer by training. She held a center at Columbia University and at the Authentic School of Journalism in Mexico. As a senior editor, Dilrukshi's work has appeared in Guardian, Washington Post, Al Jazeera, Anadolu, The Humanitarian, Reuters, you name it, everywhere in the world. She currently serves as the executive director of the Center of Investigative Reporting. And very importantly, she's a famous environmental writer and now is a writer and a curator with Mongabe International. Thank you, Dilukshi, joining us. And also, she has a link to the difficult dialogues and helps us a lot from the background. Thank you. So, also I would also want to thank those who have supported. As I said, Dilrukshi, a lot of us have helped behind. So thank you. And our own team, actually speaking, we are very much limited because of this pandemic. Our office is closed now and working from every other corner of the country. So thank you all. So I think I have covered all. It's a good, great opportunity for us. It's a great opportunity for our students to compete in this. And okay, I think all is set. I believe judges are ready, contestants are ready. So it's time to hand over to another very special person, Mudita. Just a little introduction of Mudita. I would say he's an economist by profession, but more young conservationist by heart, I should say. Proactively working with youth groups in many environmental activities, a leading member or coordinator of the Pearl Protectors. Thank you, Mudita, working with us. And I wish all debaters very best. And it's over to Mudita.
Thank you, Kamal. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that introductory briefing. Again, I want to welcome you all the distinguished panel of judges, the participants, and all the viewers joining us on Facebook Live right now. So this is the Sri Lanka's chapter of Daring Debates. And today's topic is going to be democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change. So we have an interesting lineup of teams today to start the debate. So let me first introduce the teams. So we have teams representing 4 universities joining in today. We have, for the motion of this topic, we have 4. Chandrika Manmendaran is from Sir John Kotalawala Defense University. We have Ms. Devani Shanika. She's from University of Kelaniya. We have Ravimaran Arumai Kohli. He's from Sir John Kotalawala Defense University. And Famida Fiaz from University of Kelaniya. So against the motion, we have 4 individuals as well, representing University of Colombo and University of Jaffna. Navindu Palyaguruge, representing University of Colombo. We have Janya Lumbini Subasingha from University of Jaffna, Ramalka Kasige, University of Colombo, and Satyamurthy Mathushan from University of Jaffna. So before we start this session, I want to also reach out to the judges and ask a simple question. What is your expectation? What are you expecting from today's Sri Lanka's chapter's final debate? I would like to start with Anjali Watson, if you may.
Everyone, firstly, I'd like to wish all of the debaters all the very best. I know you have a very short time to present your arguments, but I'd like to remind you to enunciate clearly so that we all understand actually what you are putting forward. I'd like to see from the debate today in-depth and knowledgeable arguments presented to showcase that you understand the complex ecological and social scenarios that make up the issue of climate change. I would also like to see a little bit of international perspective because at the end of the day, climate change is a global issue. Having said that, it does have a butterfly effect. So whatever we do locally does impact globally. I'm hoping that you guys will touch on these points. All the very best to each and every one of you.
Thank you, Anjali. Next, I would like to go to Mr. Hemant Vitanage. What are your expectations today?
Thank you. I want to wish all of you very best. This is a difficult dialogue, and internationally we are negotiating for many, many years without having much success. You know, day by day, the climate change impacts are happening everywhere. And at the end of this century, we are expecting more than 600 million people will be affected. The youth has a bigger and better role to play in this particular dialogue. So, no, I wish you will bring very good arguments, even to convince our own government, our own politicians, and even the United Nations to make this change happen, because the future of our world is depend on people like you and the youth and this young generation, and you should really think very arguably, so you bring all these effort to make this change. So I want to say that whether you have that energy, that courage, and that readiness in today's debate. Thank you again. Wish you good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Vitanage. Next, I would like to go to Ms. Dilrukshi Handunnetti. What are your expectations for today's debate?
Thank you, Mudita. I have three expectations, but before that, let me wish all the contestants every possible success. You are our face, this country's face. As Hemanta said, in this very difficult dialogue, my expectation is that you would have daring approaches and come up with practical proposals that can probably influence policymakers, the international community, and inform the rest of the world that young people have a voice and they also have great ideas. So in terms of how you propose, how you engage, I would look for structured, clear, concise, logical responses, because we would want to understand what you want to say. And then in terms of what, just as Anjali said, in terms of content, we also would like to hear a greater deal of your understanding of the issue on climate change in a local context, but with a global backdrop, in a global backdrop, so that we can look to, even though they are not necessarily very conclusive, but the practical ideas that we, take away messages for those who actually engage with us. And lastly, to showcase this as Sri Lanka's real mood talent in the country to the world. And we have ideas, we have young people, passionate and concerned, and that you have ideas that we can actually translate into action. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. And next, I would like to ask Professor Devaka Veerakon, what are your expectations for today's debate?
Good evening, everybody. I would like to first of all wish all the contestants all the very best. My expectations are, now if you look at the issue at hand, which is climate change, which requires long-term commitment, not just locally, but globally. And therefore, it will require a significant change in our behavior as to how we live, how we eat, how we basically use natural resources. So my expectation from the contestant is like, now the topic is whether democratic politics is adequate or inadequate. So Those who say inadequate, I would like to hear why. What attributes of democracy is preventing us from addressing climate change, and how it can be dealt with in a non-democratic or autocratic process, and vice versa. I would like you all to be focusing more generally on the governance issue and the failures and the successes with specific examples, uh, rather than focusing narrowly on what is happening in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Professor Devaka. So moving on, we are about to start the debate, but I would like to again welcome all the audiences that is joining in right now live on Facebook. This is going to be a very interesting session. So do feel free to share the live video link with your friends and people you think who's interested on this topic. So one thing before we start the session, it's actually to explain the rules of this debate. And also we have the debating rules as well as the virtual rules. So this is one of the first times where an online debate is conducted in such a way, and we are doing it through Zoom right now. Uh, so first of all, we have 8 participants representing different universities. Each of you, as you know which team you are in, each of you will get 2 minutes to present your arguments. And then moving on, when it is at 1.5 minutes, you will be notified. We have a timekeeper. Dilhani will notify you when you're passing 1.5 minutes. And when you reach 2 minutes, you will be asked to stop. But if you do further continue, you will be muted. So that is the rules with the time allocations. Additionally, we will be having a rebuttal session. That is after all your arguments are over. Uh, the leaders from each team will be rebutting. Each of you who's rebutting will get 2 minutes. And so each team will get 4 minutes. And like the same, you will be notified at 1.5 minutes and again at 2 minutes. After that, we the judges will have the opportunity to ask a question. So each of the participants will receive a question, and so the judges will be asking this question. Mind you, to answer to these questions, you will only have 1 minute. So do keep in mind the time limits. Don't go beyond the time limits. And then the winning individuals will be announced. The winners will actually be selected based on the following criteria. The 2 best contributors of the winning team will be chosen to represent Sri Lanka in the international debate. So that's about for the debating guidelines. Uh, Let me move on to the virtual guidelines. So virtual guidelines, as we are doing it on Zoom, I would kindly request the participants and everyone to keep to be on mute if you are not presenting. You may keep your video on. We would actually appreciate if you can keep your video on, unless you have like a connection issue or something related to Wi-Fi. Unless that, you may keep your video on. I want to remind you all to stick to the time. Do follow the allocated times because after 2 minutes you will be muted. So that is very important. And finally, I want to request all the participants to switch off any devices that will really distract you while you're presenting. So if there's any disturbances, please keep them away or switch off your phones close by. I believe everybody's using their laptops, unless if you're using a phone. If you're using a phone, do keep it horizontal. But other than that, you're fine. So let me remind of the topic again. The topic is democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change. This is the topic for today. And I want to ask anyone if they have any questions before I start. Participants, is everything clear or everything okay? All right, perfect. So let's start off with for the motion team. You will get 2 minutes to start. We'll be starting now. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The proposition presents the motion that democratic politics are in fact inadequate in combating climate change. Why is this? It is because democracy inherently promotes a culture of inefficiency, because it takes a long time for anything to get done in a democracy. It takes a long time for the decision-making chain to actually bring fruit to their plans. And on the other hand, we also have to understand one thing. Democracy as it was intended was to provide the greatest good for the greatest number. But is this actually the case in reality today, with a major role being played by organizations and entities by lobbying representatives? We can see that agendas coming from a singular entity are influencing representatives more than the people themselves. So the question arises, is a democracy actually a democracy in today's world? Because there is no such thing as a true democracy anymore, because we need to understand that lobbyists and these entities with their vast resources are in fact influencing the opinions of representatives. We can see this in many nations. So with that, that is my opening argument for as to why democracy in its current context in a majority of nations is inadequate in addressing climate change. My colleagues will also address the issues in an international context and other issues as well regarding this matter. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Chandrika. That was really good. Moving on, we move on to the other team against the motion. Over to you. You can start now.
Okay, so the opposition has been slating democracy for 2 minutes, trying to say how there's too much red tape and democracy, but they failed to give us an alternative as to, if not democracy, who else is going to protect past legislation as to combating climate change. Because if you look at it, all the progress that we've achieved so far in battling climate change has been achieved by countries that are democracies. If you look at a lot of the best democracies in the world, countries like Canada, countries like the other nations in Scandinavia. These countries, through their legislation, have been promoting research and development into cutting down emissions. Put down money to make sure they promote sustainable development. Promote things that aren't as polluting the environment. On the other hand, if you look at all the dictatorships or sort of non-democracies in the world, these are even more corrupt than the democracies that you're looking at, right? Even if side opposition looks at a few of the world's worst democracies and say, look, they don't pass effective environmental legislation, they fail to provide at least one good dictatorship that has actually done good to promote the environment. Because if you look at democracy, it's the only system that would try to entertain the majority of people's views, right? That's the only type of system which will try to maximize the overall utility and the overall productivity of the country. Therefore, we believe that democracy is the only effective form of governance right now available on planet Earth to combat climate change. Because if it's down to a single individual who has all the power, that person has more of an incentive to look at his own
8 seconds more.
benefit. Because if you look at a lot of democracies, a lot of dictatorships, rather, a lot of environmental pollution happens so that the dictator can amass a lot of wealth. They continuously keep finding sort of resources out of environmental protections and lapsing environmental laws just for their own gain. So therefore, we think democracy has an effective counter and check and balance mechanism. Therefore, we believe democracy is the most effective way to pass legislation when it comes to combating climate change.
Sir, please stop.
Thank you, Navidu. That was good. Moving on, we're back to the for the motion team. Over to you. You can start now.
According to the World Health Organization, climate change has estimated to cause over 150,000 deaths annually. In the history, we've had many international agreements to address climate change, but did it actually work? Let's move to the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which was aimed to fight against climate change, but ended up in failure. From the beginning, the US Senate refused to approve the treaty. Later, USA formally withdrew from Kyoto in 2001. Later on, even Canada failed to hit its targets, and countries like China and India grew so fast and burned so much coal, increasing the global emission. Then the Paris Agreement in 2015 was aimed to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change. But USA, even being one of the top per capita carbon emitting countries, their democratically appointed representative decided to withdraw Paris Agreement in 2017. The representatives of democracy who focus only on short-term requirements by denying the climate change is one of the major reasons of why we can't change. If I move to the context of Sri Lanka, there are plenty of examples on how some of the representatives of democracy disregarded the opinions of environmental experts and carried out their projects, which were threat to the biodiversity and the environment. Muthurajville wetland, which was known as the swamp of royal treasure, was destroyed by dumping garbage. Wilpatha National Park, the oldest and largest national park of the country, was subjected to deforestation. Despite how coal power plants directly contributes to climate change, Sri Lanka welcomed harmful coal with open arms
30
instead of
seconds more.
encouraging renewable sources of energy. Where were the democratic politics when these kind of incidents took place? These incidents would have never happened if democratic politics was adequate. Therefore, it is very clear that democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Devani. Moving on, against the motion, you can start now. Ramaka, you can start.
The contrary to the popular belief, elected leaders are better equipped to address the problems than their autocratic rivals, honorable judges and members of the proposition. The inherent feature of democratic institutions are beneficial and favorable for countries' commitment in solving environmental problems. How? The best example comes from the announcement in 2019 by 6 UK parliamentary committees to hold a citizens' assembly on climate emergency as a crucial step towards achieving a pathway to net zero carbon emissions. From economists calling for an economy-wide carbon tax to scientists advocating Earth system governance at a planetary level, experts were assuring that they have strategies to cut down greenhouse gas emissions. And next, also, the Citizen Assembly held in Ireland in 2019 again. The citizens came up with strategies, simply radical and confident, and most of them were taken forward by the government as well. And currently in UK, many local areas have set up processors to decide their own suggestions to come up to the next level of combating climate change. So you can see here that the path in approaching solutions are connected to countries' participation. The participation
30 seconds
of
more.
people. And the only form of governance that will support this is a democratic system. And if it's not democratic, it's not realistic. So as the opposition, we stand firmly against the fact that, against the motion of democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change. We are strongly standing against this motion.
Please stop.
Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ramalka. Moving on for the motion. Ready? You can start now.
The question in this debate is whether we want a better planet. So why are democratic politics inadequate? Reason number one, if you believe that a system that was elected by majority is one that cares about the climate change, so far what has it been? It has been an utter failure to respond, a failure to act, a failure to accept scientific reviewed data, failure as species, failure to care about anything except be in convenient denial. Why? Let's look at it in a global context. There was denial in 1980s by political leaders. There has been a lack of understanding even in 2020. In between, the observed warming rate has varied from year to year, decade to decade, and even place to place. The most usual solution to the acknowledged emergency has been pathetically inadequate greenhouse gas emission reduction targets in the short term and heroic pleasures over the long term, which later generations of political leaders are somehow expected to fulfill. In a local context, Sri Lanka has seen a historical increase both in the number and the intensity of droughts, floods, etc. Yes, we have institutions for environmental protection, but they are far from perfect. They struggle to collaborate and cooperate. If they do, their actions are very slow. The lessons learned from each initiative is not absorbed or mainstream. They are just disseminated. So we repeat the cycle of ignorance, making the same mistakes and letting climate change affect our people, businesses, and so on. We have national climate action plans prepared, but are they being implemented? Are we raising funds? Are we educating the public? Are we changing economic policies? The answer, a resounding no. Simply, democratic politics has failed
30 seconds
humanity.
more.
The second argument, climate change is a global challenge that requires decisive decision making for the future. As my previous speaker mentioned, democratic politics has failed in Rio, Kyoto, Copenhagen. The steps taken by many democratic countries are regarded insufficient to reach the goals even of Paris Agreement. If the past doesn't teach us, it's just that we've had so many false promises, acts, commitments since the dawn of time, proving the inadequacy of democratic politics. 90 people killed in a heat wave in India, loss of habitat, food sources for over a billion of
Time's up.
animals
Please
due to
stop.
Australian bushfires.
Excellent. Thank you, Pamida. Moving on against the motion. If you are ready, you can start now.
If you're really going to argue whether democratic politics is adequate or not, the best way to do is to take a look on the Climate Change Performance Index, where you will find the toppers are the countries like Sweden and Denmark, which are fascinatingly, obviously, the toppers of Democracy Index. So, what does this mean? This means the democratic politics is well adequate to address climate change and even the best. And secondly, the democratic politics is not the fault. Agreeing on you, the proposition, the lack of the democracy is what's causing the trouble and becoming undemocratic. So what we need is more and more democracy. And moving to environmental democracy, it ensures that the public has a voice in the decisions that impact their health and the environment, while the decision makers seek solutions. I believe it is a critical step in addressing climatic change, which we don't see in any other non-democracies. And according to the IPCC, low-income individuals are more prone to expose to hazards and have a hard time recovering it. For example, the loss of homes due to rising sea level. And democracies are the ones who actually hear the voice of these innocent poor minorities, unlike our proposition tonight, who might scapegoat these marginalized communities to stay in power. Yes, we agree that we need an urgent solution, and people need to be responsible and responsive. And the scientists need to discover low carbon technologies and possible ways to capture the excess carbon dioxide in the environment. And people need to adapt to climate change and its mitigations. This is how it works. And it's not possible to solve this by a quick fix of one or a few. So to get the best outcomes, democratic politics provide the perfect examples and perfect environment. Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you, Janya. Moving on for the motion. You can start now.
Yes, democratic government politics is inadequate to address the climate change. Why? So finding out the reason, I'm coming up with some of the statistics. In the 20th century, Sri Lanka was nearly 70% covered with a forest, but currently it's less than 16.5. During these years, we had the democratic government. What happened to these things? Why does the forestation rates, the forests were deforested? What's the reason? But we have the democratic government. As the opposition says, we should have all the forest keeps growing and it should have been covering all the land part of the Sri Lanka. I'm coming up with another fact that it was the main problem in Sri Lanka. It's elephant-human conflict. Even recently, there was a youth who took photos from the Ambara where elephants eating garbages and all, which was highly highlighted all over the world. But what was the action taken by the government? We have a democratic government. We are having most of the countries in the world are having democratic governments. But what was the action taken by them? I'm coming up with another problem. That was the Vedatal TV National Reserve thing. That was established as a protected reserve by the government in 2016. But recently, they are going for an aquaculture project, which will earn them millions of dollars. So democratic governments are more focused on the economy and bringing in the foreign currency and all. And another incident, Vanathavillu, Anavuluanda, and the Singaraja forest, they have been deforested. Yes, we are having democratic government in Sri Lanka. It's democratic politics. Then why does the government is not taking action against this? So this has to be addressed. I am asking the opponent to explain that why the democratic government in Sri Lanka is not being able to take action against this. Why they are not being able to address against
Time's
this
up.
kind
Please
of
stop.
acting against climate change. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ravivaran. So the final participant against the motion. If you're ready, you can start now.
As we all know, the impending doom of our century is climatic change. Yes, it's obvious we need significant changes for this climatic crisis. And I have to start with the answer for the opponent members that in Sri Lanka's elephants are eating garbages and no action is taken. Actually, they are not updated with the recent activities. Our government has said from 2021, single usage of plastics will be absent. So the law has been put and they are not updated. Then let me take you into two pathways. First one, the opponent member said that some democratic countries like US, they are electing people who are complete climate deniers. We accept truly. But in that case scenario, the problem was democracy deficit, not fully to blame on the democracy policies. And the second thing, one or two democratic politicians would not reflect all the other democratic countries which are performing well in the climatic change. And the third thing, even it was a negative result in some countries such as US, the fourth pillar of democracy, the media and the people, we were able to ask the questions, we were able to ask the accountability to specific governments as our honorable opposition members are doing now in this platform. And the second way of argument I would like to take, if it not the democratic, how it's very much impractical for the other kind of politics to address the climate change. First thing, they would base only on the economic basis, which is for public stand. And second thing, they would not be
30 seconds
accountable
more.
for their citizens. And the third thing, climate change needs changes in our way of electricity, our way of agriculture, our way of industrialization. If these changes are made by other kind of regimes, people would create protests and there will be less popularity for the climate change. So, and another major thing, our democratic system has the voting system, which is the correction mechanism for mistakes, which is lacking other kind of regimes. So, democratic system is not perfect, but it is the best kind of system to
Thank you,
adequate climate
Madhushan.
change. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhushan. Great. So we have come to the end of the first session. Your arguments were really great. Next, we are going to move on to the rebuttaling session. We will have two participants from each team rebuttaling. We will be moving back to the for the motion team. If you're ready, you can start now.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let us understand one thing. First and foremost, the motion reads, the motion is that the motion we present is that democratic politics are inadequate. We are not promoting an alternative medium of government. That is simply not on the agenda. It is not incumbent upon us to say, you know what, democracy doesn't work, here's an alternative. It is simply our point to prove that democracy in itself, in its essence, in reality is inadequate. And that is the sole point that we are making. So do not make the assumption that we are promoting something as autocracy or aristocracy in its place. Secondly, we need to understand that the opposition speaker stated that a majority of the advancements and achievements in combating climate change came from democracies. That is true, but so did most of the mistakes. So did most of the issues that were created in combating climate change. That was also done by most of the majority of the democracies. Moving on from that, ladies and gentlemen, with regards to the plastics issue and elephants, we need to understand, yes, the government can make plans as they have done earlier. We can see with the Meethotamulla incident. Yes, back in the day, as soon as it happened, we moved into a very environmental conscious lifestyle. But as we can see, as time went on, that notion has eroded from the minds of Sri Lankans and we have fallen back. We have regressed, right? And moving on from that, we also need to understand some important fact. And that is that in a perfect world where perfect democracy exists, it is possible for it to work. However, that is not the world we live in. We live in a world where singular entities have money, have power, have influence. Democracies tend to work in situations where each individual component of society has an equal standing. That is not the case in the real world. That is not the case in Sri Lanka, nor in a majority of other countries. That is why, while on theory, on paper, democracy can work, in reality, it is impossible for democracy to be adequate in combating climate change. It will never be adequate. We need something more. And that is not, and what is that more? That is not the point we're trying to make here. Our job here is to simply prove that democracy is inadequate, and that is the motion. And it is incumbent upon the opposition to prove that it is adequate and not to question as to alternatives.
Time's
Thank you,
up.
sir.
Please stop.
Thank you, Chandrika. Excellent. Moving on, against the motion, you can start rebutting. Starting now.
Dear judges, what side proposition has been telling so far is that they've been taking examples from Sri Lanka, which isn't the best democracy in the world, and try to extrapolate that into saying every democracy works like that. But the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is when you look at all the best democracies in the world, countries like Denmark, Sweden, Canada, all these countries have achieved significant progress and adequate progress when it comes to battling climate change. In fact, these countries are ranked high in the climate change index, right? Why? Because these countries have created this environmental conscious mentality, and these democracies have been actively working towards finding legislature, finding procedures, or doing things in a way that impacts pollution less, in a way that you can reverse the effects of climate change. Therefore, it is quite clear that these good democracies in the world have actually achieved something tangible when it comes to battling climate change. We've never had enough responses coming from side opposition to combat this idea. What they've always done was to bring up examples from Sri Lanka just to tell the House that, look, if Sri Lanka is bad, that's the case when it comes to all countries. We understand the Sri Lanka situation is bad, but the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is in a democracy, Sri Lankan government has done certain things when it comes to battling environmental change, like the ban of single-use plastic, like reducing emissions, and many other environmental conservation projects. So therefore, we believe that when it comes to democracies, they are the most equipped sort of system of governance, because that's the only way multiple stakeholders' perspectives will be entertained. So in that system, we believe, given that most people are dependent on the environment, these people's views will be taken into regard, and given that these kind of things will be affected by climate change, we think democracy is at a better place to cater to these problems as compared to any other form of governance. And we think there has been significant progress achieved by all these democracies. Therefore, it's highly clear that democratic form of governance is adequate when it comes to battling climate change. Thank you.
Time's up.
Splendid. Thank you, Navidu. Moving back for the motion, you can start rebutting starting now.
Okay, what has side opposition come up today? They've told us, they've given us few examples as to why somehow democracy works. They've told us Canada, they've told us Denmark. What about in countries where the corruption index is low or very high in that case? So when we compare democratic countries in that case where corruption is high, we see that only in countries where the corruption rates are low, that some sort of air pollution has been reduced to a great extent. Side opposition has been harping on about finding an alternative. Not in a single speech did we say aristocracy or autocracy was our alternative. If any, it should be technocracy, where the opinion or the people who are appointed are people who have sound and scientific knowledge and expertise when it comes to a certain field. If it's climate change, it's going to be people who are going to be educated in that case. Moving on about our burden of proof right now is not to give an alternative, but if any, we never suggested aristocracy. Secondly, they spoke about how Denmark is a country that sets up standards. Then we have to think about the low corruption index that it has and have to compare it with countries that have high corruption index. Thirdly, they spoke about how democracy is a system where there are checks and balances. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to consider that apart from corruption in democracy, we have to also consider democratic performance like bureaucratic capacity and the strength of the rule of law. All these factors influence when it comes to democracy. So democracy is not a checks and balance, but it's a gaping hole and ineffectiveness. Thirdly, they spoke about how, yes, democratic policies has these core characteristics. It fulfills accountability. It ensures free media is there. But we saw that when the climate action agenda was going to be put forward, there were people in the fossil fuel industry undermining the scientific work, undermining the results of scientific people, therefore using the media as an advantage for the fossil fuel industry. Therefore, we saw how free media was disadvantaged. Our government has said that they're going to stop single-use plastic, but we've had so many action commitments so far. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1980s was the first time where climate change was regarded, and now what have we done so far?
Thank you, Famida. Thank you. Excellent. So finally, we are moving into against the motion. The final participant, you can start now.
Ladies and gentlemen, It is quite entertaining because what our propositions are talking about is exactly what we are talking, because they are talking about the countries who lack democracy. Exactly, that's the point. When you lack the democracy, you will have to face a lot of problems. That's the exact point what you're talking here. And I would like to ask you, do you really think USA is a true democratic country? I don't believe that. You need to find it yourself. And this is absolutely something that is, what I can say is this is a misconception, because you're talking about some fake democracies, flawed democracies, and above all, these are not true democracies. What we have to talk about is true democracy. So, with that in mind, I'm moving to corruption. I don't really believe corruption. We can justify. We don't have the power to criminalize democracy by using corruption. Why? Corruption is something common to everything, and it's not even a systematic error. And what is more important is democracy know that people make mistakes, and that's why they have this mechanism what we call as voting system. What next time, please vote for uncorrupted leader, then you will find the solution. If you don't do that, and if you follow this authoritarian populism like in USA, you will end up with nothing, but you will fight for your life rather than addressing climate change. And of course, I would like to ask, just because of these small mistakes the democracy has,
30 seconds more.
would you really give up on democracy? Which, in other words, means you are giving up equity, you are giving up minority, you are giving up voting power, you are giving up absolutely yourself. Is that what you want? Of course not. And if, as they're not proposing any alternative, all right, I propose what you should go with is magic. That's the only cure you have, because nothing else in this world has something better to provide to people
And
than
stop, please stop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janya. Excellent. So we come to an end with the debating. Next section is where the judges will ask a question from each of the participants. Do keep in mind, like I said before, you will only have 1 minute to answer to each of the questions. One judge will ask 2 questions from 2 participants. And I would like to start with Anjali Watson. Anjali, if you're ready, this is over to you.
Well done, everyone. Chandrika, I'm going to ask you a question. I know you addressed this in your rebuttal already about, the democracy and an ideal democracy, and that's not what you're dealing with. But what I would like to ask you is, how would you deal with the scenario where you have a leader or a dictator that does not actually believe in the climate change scenario?
Right, ma'am. Okay. First thing is that we need to understand that this, I am a person who personally believes that our solution to climate change is not going to come from a parliament in the form of a bill, right? I'm not going to believe that one day parliament is going to be like, all right, this is the law that's going to solve our problems. This is how we're going to get rid of climate change. I don't believe that. I believe that we need to make systematic changes on an individual basis down at the community level, right? We need to consciously make that decision on our own. I need to consciously make the decision to reduce my consumption of beef so that so there's a less demand for cattle, which creates much more methane gas. I need to consciously make the decision to use hybrid vehicles. I need to consciously make the decision to switch to a much more green lifestyle, so to speak. I do not believe that the concept of the mode of governance involved is an absolute fundamental factor that we need to consider in combating climate change. However, what we do propose here is that climate change cannot be dealt with by the current state of democracy we have. And the more democracy that they're speaking of is impossible to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandrika. Anjali, if you may, the second question. Sorry, Anjali, I think you're on mute. If you...
Okay. Can I ask it from Janya? Is that all right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Janya, I'd like to ask you, how would you deal with a voter base that is largely uneducated on the specifics of climate change?
Ma'am, I think it's the responsibility of a democratic government to educate the voters. So when the democracy is declining and it lacks democracy itself, we can't actually expect something like to have educated voters. So when we establish a true democracy, and I believe it lies with us, everybody has to work it out, and we should play an active role, then we can actually go for what you suggest.
Great. Thank you, Janya. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Hemant Vitanage to ask his question. Mr. Vitanage, over to you.
So I'll ask my question to Divani. My question is about the UNFCCC is a very democratic space in terms because it's a UN body. But after even 2 decades later, even more, why we are not able to come to a sort of a successful negotiations to deal with the climate change?
Thank you for the question, sir. So first thing I would like to highlight is it is the inadequacy of democratic politics which actually lead us here. Because in democratic politics, like the major requirement that is highlighted is the requirement of people, the immediate requirements of people, not those long-term plans such as climate change. Because for climate change, it is a long-term plan. Long-term negotiations must be done. So when it comes to like immediate, fulfilling the immediate requirements, the democratic leaders, actually that's where they focus on. And also it's the cost, we can say, but the people say, but these leaders say is that combating against climate change is expensive. But what is more expensive is actually the consequences of climate change. And another plan is the collective active problem, where many people, actually many representatives of the countries have different ideas, different agendas. And they have different perspectives because some democratic leaders are in complete denial of climate change.
Sir, please stop.
Thank you, Divani. Hemant Vitanage, you may ask your second question.
Can I ask my second question from Navindu?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I think the proposition mentioned already that some of those countries like the Russia, USA, they have pulled out from these climate negotiations. So UNA is a democratic government per se, but is it because it's a democratic democracy is the issue, or is it the corporate influence? So I want to understand a bit more about why some of these countries got pulled out from the very democratic space like the UNFCCC and even the Kyoto Protocol.
Look, what we are trying to say is unless there is sort of cooperation, there won't be any sort of effect that you can take to get climate change. Yes, we understand certain countries did pull out of these kind of these democratic platforms, but we think it's sort of other political or other sort of issues where certain world leaders have their egos crossing and that sort of all sort of other influences at play. But we think on a purely democratic platform, especially in the international scale, you would want everyone's cooperation. And if you don't, and you know, on the international scale, each country is treated the same. Every country has one vote. And in that sort of a scenario, unless you have a democratic space, you won't be able to make countries appeal to whatever program that you're trying to do, because you can't insult other countries and get them to pass legislation that's battling climate change. You have to respect their countries, you have to get their cooperation. If not, and I think that's what happened in most of the cases, because a lot of world leaders kept mocking Donald Trump, which he used as an excuse to pull out of this
country. Thank you, Navidu. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Dilrukshi Anduneti to ask the questions. Dilrukshi, if you are ready, you may ask your first question.
Yes, I think I can ask from Famida. The question is to Famida.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. If the government should lead the way towards solution seeking to climate-related issues, Why is climate financing such a huge concern, so contentious and so considered so corrupt? What would be your two quick thoughts, two quick proposals to overcome governance issues relating to climate finance?
First thing is that we have an inadequate amount of funds when it comes to climate finance is the people who have the money are not willing to spend it on climate change. Reason number one is because climate change, we're going to reap the benefits after a very long time. If you take actions now, you're not going to get solutions tomorrow. You're not going to visibly see it. You're not going to get it. So that's reason number one. They're going to invest it in a place where they're going to get profited over a long period of time. But climate change is not such instances. So if I was to give a solution as to how climate finance can be, we can make sure that we have to make sure that the government takes sole responsibility to ensure that climate financing or the funds that they have are invested when it comes to finding research, because we know of several disasters that are going to occur in current context, but we don't know of any other disasters that will come in the future. So if anything, we should make sure that climate financing is going to be funded for the research, making sure that that way we can have opportunities as a democratic country like Sri Lanka, we can show our research to other people and make sure that that way we can get some funds.
Thank you, Pamida. Dilruksh, if you may ask the second question.
Sorry, can I ask Mutushan my next question? Yeah,
sure, go ahead.
So my question is, with increasing vulnerability, and I'm sure he relates to this, and particularly at vulnerable communities, what kind of adaptation and mitigation can they contribute to? I mean, how can communities lead and contribute to dealing with climate change in an effective manner?
Actually, it starts from individual. Like we should first feel that this earth is under danger, and we should first think that this is our earth we live in, and we should feel responsible, first thing. And the second thing, we should actively participate in the voting process. That is very much lacking in our country and many democratic countries. And we should actually asking for the accountability, like for the politicians, and the media should ask that there is a climate change problem. Like in all the democratic countries, when the media and the people are trying to ask the politicians the accountability for the climate change, what they have done, there will be solutions for these kind of community people. And the third thing, I feel like community wise, each kind of people who are very much richer and there are poorer, there are two kind of people. And the richer people should understand more about the awareness that this earth is distracting, and they should give up a hand contributing as cooperating as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Matishan. Thank you, Dilruksh. Next, I would like to invite Professor Devaka Veerakon. Professor Devaka, you may ask your first question if you're ready.
Yeah, my first question is to Ramalka.
Okay.
So basically, climate change require long-term actions against multiple generations. However, electoral policies are geared towards immediate issues because that's what wins votes for the politicians. So, given that, do you think that the democratic approach can be used to address the climate change issue that we are facing today in an effective manner?
Yes. So, being in the democratic platform, voting power is one of the main advantages that we see. So, as having the voting power, as concerned citizens who has the potential and who is wanting to combat and mitigate and work towards the effects of climate change, coming up with the voting power, they can elect responsible and educated people to develop policies and combat and come up with solutions for the long-term process of climate change. And also, as concerned citizens, they could also join along with them, coming up with their solutions and ideas in order to work towards mitigating climate change, which is the sole purpose and which
Time's
goals
up.
are
Please stop.
facilitated in a democratic platform.
Thank you, Ramaka. Professor Devaka, you may ask your second question.
So I think it goes to Ravi Raman. You pointed out a number of failures in the in our government to actually do things that is necessary to address the environmental issues. But what you have really shown is the failure in our government to adhere to democratic policies, not the failure in the democratic process itself. So, do you strongly believe that there is a way for us to address the climate change outside the democratic process, simply because people are failing to apply the democratic process in the political system?
Thank you for the question, sir. Actually, when it comes to environmental issue, like this is not going to give an immediate results back to us. If we are acting immediately, this is not going to be a problem of ours. The current generation has everything from the earth and all, but it's the problem about the future. Uh, yeah, in my view, democracy is perfect, but the problem is it's not realistic at all. Theoretically, it's fine, but when it comes to reality, as it has to satisfy the immediate voters, the voters just in Sri Lanka, if you take it's 50, 60 or percentage voters is more than enough to make the government. So the government is always trying to satisfy the citizens, those who are currently in the world. They are not going to think about the future or anything else. So if we are going beyond democracy, it will be dictatorship, but it will be good for the environment. But when we are thinking about all the other things, when it comes to humans, freedom, and all the other things, it will affect us in the other way. But
Time's up. Please stop.
theoretically fine, it should be come
Thank
to
you.
Thank
Thank you. Perfect. So we have come to an end of both rebuttaling, the debating, and all the questions that were asked from the judges. I think this was an excellent session, very informative. Everybody presented precisely. Now, of course, we are going to move on to the final stage where the judges will actually score, and they will be sharing the winners, the details of the winners much a little bit later. So we will be having a short break till that time. But during that time, I just wanted to bring in, I want to highlight about the daring debates, which we are hosting right now. So daring debates is one of a kind debate series, which aims to provide and bring students from varied backgrounds and regions in the discourse of critical issues that concerns the world. Daring Debates is an initiative to promote student participation in the overall process of policy formation and to ensure that their opinions are far-reached. Daring Debates is part of the annual Difficult Dialogue Summit. You can get more information if you visit their website on Facebook as well. So far, 5 successful editions of Daring Debates have been conducted in various cities in India. In its 6th year, Daring Debates is going global to ensure a bigger participation of young people from across the world. This year, it will be an integral part of the prestigious Global Sustainability Film Awards, which is also known as the GSFA. This is co-organized by TVE, which stands for Television for the Environment and Difficult Dialogues. The selected and the talented youth from parts of Africa, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Nepal, USA, and of course Sri Lanka will participate in the grand finale on 16th of November 2020. So the winners will actually be participating in that session in the finale. Let me talk a little bit about the Global Sustainability Film Awards. So in response to the COVID-19 crisis, the 9th annual Global Sustainability Film Awards is moving online. From November 16th to the 20th, they will be joining forces with Difficult Dialogues to produce and inspire a week-long online event that will include dialogues, debates, and also films. So, what is TV Global Sustainability Film Awards? This is probably the first time you're hearing this. So, it's actually a Global Sustainability Film Awards, recognizes outstanding films from the businesses, non-profit, media, and creative sectors that inspire audiences with real-world solutions for a more sustainable future. A film is a powerful tool for increasing public awareness, as we all know, shifting public opinion and inspiring due action. The GSFA seeks to promote effectively storytelling about environmental and sustainability issues. Uh, Difficult dialogues, what it is? Well, it's based in India. This is the 6th year they are running, as I mentioned earlier. Difficult dialogues comprises intensive discussions on a different theme every year between diverse stakeholders, including academic, youth, celebrities. We have politicians, corporate, and international organizations joining in. This year, the dialogues will be held online in conjunction with the GSFA and will focus on environmental issues and challenges. So I want to, we'll be going into a few videos, which you will see in a second. This will provide you with more information, and you can also be part of it as well. So yeah, let's move on to that. And after that, we'll be announcing the winners. So stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm the Director of Programs here at the American Center in New Delhi. We're delighted to be working today with Difficult Dialogues to bring this debate.
It's a part of me, daring debates, and I'm one of those who have dared to debate the patriarchy, the construct that we live in.
As lawyers pleading their cases and not by the theme as suggested.
When I entered the gender studies classroom, what I was told was the first thing, that masculinity and femininity are inherent traits in all of us, which explains a lot. When I sit with my legs wide open in my house and my mother never fails to point out. She tells me you're being masculine. She tells me this will not do good with your husband.
Do you think students in private schools will become pleasant, or do you think students in government schools will become pleasant?
Students from both domains are able to handle pressure. In private, I think it's more because they have an added burden of homework, extracurricular activities and other stuff.
Only bookish and theoretical knowledge is no longer enough to put you ahead of the competition. And private institutions are willing to go that extra mile for you.
I was just so really impressed and overwhelmed by the depth and clarity of your understanding.
The power of film and storytelling can't be underestimated to create change. But the challenge is big.
I fundamentally believe that film has a hugely important role to play in helping people understand and engage and be inspired to act about the huge environmental challenges that are facing our planet.
These pioneers already have the answers that we need.
Conservationists and local people have shown just what a difference can be made when we work together.
The team has therefore found a sustainable, groundbreaking design solution, one that can be retrofitted easily at a low cost and adapted to other regions around the globe.
Fair trade has worked so hard for the last 20 years to create a model of business with purpose.
And thousands of people thrown out of work, boats beached, canneries emptied, and I think that's where I began to understand that sort of there'll be no jobs on a dead planet.
When we started the Global Sustainability Film Awards, the idea was not just to do corporate social responsibility outside of the company, but also to change things within.
We do not fight because of material, because of diamonds. That is why we took up arms, because people have been misusing the natural resources of this country to enrich themselves.
Coral is become dying and no more fish. It's like a sick ocean.
90% of fisheries globally are already fully exploited.
There can't be a happy ending until we all wake up to the rhythm of disruption, worldwide eruptions because we're sick of the corruption.
Hi, my name's Richard. I'm the Director of Programs here at the American Center in New Delhi. We're delighted to be working today with Difficult Dialogues to bring this debate.
It's a part of me, daring debates. And I'm one of those who have dared to debate the patriarchy, the construct that we live in.
As lawyers pleading the cases and not by the theme as suggested.
When I entered the gender studies classroom, what I was told was the first thing, that masculinity and femininity are inherent traits in all of us, which explains a lot. Then I sit with my legs wide open in my house and my mother never fails to point out. She tells me you're being masculine. She tells me this will not do good with your husband.
Do you think students in private schools will become pleasant, or do you think students in government schools will become pleasant?
Students from both domains are able to handle pressure. In private, I think it's more because they have an added burden of homework, extracurricular activities and other stuff.
Only bookish and theoretical knowledge is no longer enough to put you ahead of the competition. And private institutions are willing to go that extra mile for you.
I was just so really impressed and overwhelmed by the depth and clarity of your understanding.
The time to look at problems beyond food, shelter and clothing. Let the ideas start flowing. Let's have unheard vichar.
Very great months who are out.
I've realized that the Me Too movement comes from deep trauma.
As a woman director, when my crew talks to me in a certain way, I know they're talking to me like that because I'm a woman.
How do we bring all the streams of financing together to enhance a learning environment in the school?
So let's say religion is in education, but it shouldn't be taken as gospel.
But we do need to change the conversation behind screen if we want to see the conversation changing on screen.
I don't think cinema can really make a change in the society or can bring about any revolution in the society, but it is responsible for bringing or keeping that issue under constant discussion. We don't forget it.
It is not that these issues are not being responded to. They are being responded to. There is enormous action.
A dialogue that should not get over here. This is an important dialogue. This needs to continue amongst the people in the communities.
We do not fight because of material, because of diamonds. That is why we took up arms, because people are misusing the natural resources of this country to enrich themselves.
Coral is become dying and no more fish. It's like a sick ocean.
90% of fisheries globally are already fully exploited.
There can't be a happy ending until we all wake up to the rhythm of disruption, worldwide eruptions because we're sick of the corruption.
We do not fight because of material, because of diamonds. That is why we took up arms, because people are misusing the natural resources of this country to enrich themselves.
Coral is become dying and no more fish. It's like a sick ocean.
Welcome everyone, welcome back. So we have the results with us of the winners of the Daring Debates, the Sri Lankan chapter. But before we announce the winners, I would like to get feedback from the judges, the panel of judges, on what they thought, how the debate went, and maybe some areas of improvement for everyone. So I would like to start with, again, Anjali Watson, if you can provide your feedback on today's debating session.
Welcome to all of you. I have to say it was a very difficult topic because of its broad scope that you all had to deal with. And also it was a bit of a tricky question in a sense. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more specifics on democratic politics itself and maybe alternatives to that. Overall, there were other examples where you all dealt with climate change and how it had, failed in certain democracies and so on. It was a tricky question. Overall, I think you all, in the given time, you all managed to handle it. I think it was quite close. In some of the questions we asked, I think there was maybe not enough reply to the question specifically. But otherwise, well done to all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anjali, for your feedback. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Hemanta Vitanage. What do you think about today's session?
Thank you. Well done, everybody. I think while you have a difficult dialogue, so we had a difficult time to putting marks on each action. So I think everyone argued very well. Everyone brought a lot of good ideas, on how the democracy works or how the democracy does not works. But at the same time, I think we have quite good examples on how this the democratic spaces were taken by the corporate sector, and why it is not working sometime. At the same time, if there's no democratic space, I think so where is the other space? So this is the international argument we have. We have some limitations about the how the UNFCCC is working, but at the same time, which other platforms we have in this world. So I think you have argued in both ways. So I believe that you will get more improved when you go to the international level. I'm sure through this debate, two students will get selected to go to the international level, and you will be representing Sri Lanka and keep the name of Sri Lanka flagging high at the international level. Wish you all good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Vitanage. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Dilrukshi Handunatti. What are your feedback for today's session?
Thank you, Mudita. Congratulations to all the contestants. I think given the short space of time, you did a brilliant job. It wasn't the easiest topic, and it wasn't easy to answer all those questions, and it wasn't easy calculating marks for you guys as well. So there was a good mix of global and local in this round of arguments, which was really good to see that people were looking at a national issue in a global context and looking for answers in that. There were specifics also discussed. I just wish there were, of course, we were constrained by time. If there was a possibility to discuss this, as Hemanta suggested, if there was a possibility of looking at, how to look for solutions at multiple layers. I mean, there are many things that fall off our table when we go into the binaries. So I wish it was possible, and I do understand time was really against all of us. So may the better contestants win. As I said at the beginning, you guys are going to be the face of all of us and the country, the youth, the aspirational youth, who will probably come up with solutions for generations to come. So good luck at the international level to those who are going to emerge as winners.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. Great. So finally, Professor Devaka Veerukon, what are your feedback for today's debating session?
Thank you, Mudita. I think I would like to start off by congratulating the contestants. You have done a fantastic job. Having said that, I think I would like to present my how I perceived it. I think both sides came up with very solid arguments and very nicely presented. But I think the first team presented a number of arguments as to why the democratic politics have failed to address the climate change issue effectively. But I have also expected them to present some arguments as to why the democratic process itself would not be effective rather than just showing some of the weak democracies and the mistakes they have made. But if you take the democratic process itself, will that not be effectively addressed, and why? If you have presented few arguments along those lines, I would have appreciated it much. And for the other team, you have presented many arguments to show that the democratic system works. However, I would have also expected you to give some examples as to why the non-democratic systems, like the autocratic systems in this world, have failed even more in addressing climate change issues. Countries like North Korea, or places where they have rather, or China, where they have the democracy is not practiced, or it's more towards autocratic kind of governance, and how they have failed to achieve the climate change or address the climate change issue in a manner that is even as less effective. Maybe the democratic system doesn't work, but the non-democratic system doesn't work, is even worse. So if you have presented few arguments in support of that, I would have appreciated it much. But I must say, all of you have done very well, and I would like to congratulate both the winning team and the other team. There can only be one winner. It was a closely contested debate, and it was a very difficult debate because globally also this is a highly debated topic, whether democracy can address the climate change issue, or whether it can address the challenge that we are facing in addressing the climate change. So I would like to congratulate you all, and I would like to wish the winning team who goes and represents us, Sri Lanka, in the global contest, all the very best, and I hope you will come back with the trophy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Veerakon. As Professor Devaka Veerakon mentioned, it was a very difficult result. The scoring was very tight, and I think I personally believe that the points that many of you brought up were very relevant. We live in a time when there's constant updates, especially when environment. As we speak, we are getting news from Panadura where there's about so many whales being beached. So this is the situation. And so finally, I have the team who won. So the team who won today was actually the against the motion, team against the motion were the winners. And from that team, the best performing or the contributors were Navindu Palyaguruge and Janya Lumbini Subasingha. So congratulations, both of you. You will be qualifying to go forward in this debating, and you will be representing Sri Lanka, as many of the judges just mentioned. So congratulations again, and congratulations all of you. You guys did very well. And I would like to invite Mr. Kamal Lienage to give the vote of thanks before we conclude this debating session. Thank you, everyone. Kamal, over to you.
Yes, a very good time, exciting time. We also wanted to see who is winning, how best the competition is. That sort of things running in our minds. Although we, as we promised to the contestants, we wanted to have a good battle, good competition among you, and actually should tell you that we had a good team, and that's why it was tough to decide. And I felt judges wanted to discuss a little more and see how now with this setup, very limited online setup, it's tough to discuss a lot more, and sometimes they could have asked more questions from you. But yes, there is a time limit for anything, and there are limitations with regard to selecting people, selecting teams. And I wish the winning team and also Navindu and Janya for representing Sri Lanka with this win. Yes, we would love to see all of you winning, but there are only 2 opportunities Dennis is given to us to send to India for the competition, and then we have selected. And also at times I also thought that it's better I should also be in the judging panel to give my marks, sort of. But it's very exciting. That's the reason behind it. So thank you and congratulate all the participants, all the contestants for your effort and also the contributions you have made. It's a very tight time. I know some of you are already locked down in the Western province, and then some are not really able to go out and discuss among yourself other than this online setup. So at that time, it's a good effort. Wish you all. And also a big thank for the judges. They also came up and without any fuss. It's like they have done a superb job. They wanted to give the best, and they wanted to give the best opportunity for you, and they wanted to contribute by their knowledge. They see we have seen how they have reviewed your performances. So thank you very much, Professor Devaka.